All right, well, it's time to get back to math. TCAPs are over, so we're ready to get on the roll. We are looking at lesson 11 from Module 6. We're going back to decimals. And as we look at this today, we're putting them in order. I can compare and order mixed numbers in various forms. Okay, so what we've got to do is take a look at these today, and we need to write them as decimals first. I mean, you can do these, look at them, and probably put them in order. As you read your questions today, make sure you pay close attention to the order it's asking you to put them in. This first one says least to greatest. So we want to find the smallest one of these right here, and then put them in order from least to greatest. It helps me to see them all written in the same form, which we know how to do that pretty easily. So we've got a 0.2. What does 1/10 look like? It looks like 0.1. And we've got a decimal. What's 12 100ths look like? It looks like 0.12. And we got a decimal, and 32 hundredths looks like that. So it's easier for me when I can see them in decimal form. So as I look at these, I see a 1/10. Okay, that looks like the smallest to me. 1/10 looks like this. No. If anyone has the black and red watch, is in the office. Thank you. Sorry about that. So what we've got to do is write these in order from least to greatest, then starting with the least. And we have found that 1/10 is the least. So I'm going to write them down here in the box. So 0.1. When you type it in today, separate them with a comma. Put a comma. My goodness.
The group picture envelope forms, when you get those turned in, those just need to be sent to the office. Also, just a reminder that you do have to log your morning's form in. Thank you.
Lots of interruptions this morning. Sorry about that. All right, so when you type it in, put a comma right after the number, then a space, and then do the next number. That's how you are supposed to put a comma. Just don't space after this number, then put a comma, then space, and put the next one. So I'm going to check them off as I write them. Otherwise, I'm going to forget which ones I've done. Now let's look. 0.1 again, but with a 2 after it. Okay, so this is like 10 hundredths. This would be like 12 hundredths. So we need to put that one next. 0.12. 12 hundredths would be next. Now I'm going to look and see if I have any more ones in the tenth spot. I don't, but I've got some twos in the 10th spot. So there's one with a 2. There's one with a 2. So 2/10 is smaller than 21 hundredths because this would have a 0 after it, obviously. So comma, space, 0.2, comma. Then I'm going to use my other one with a 2 in the 10th space. 0.21, 21 hundredths. And then I'm going to look for any more 2s. There's not, so I'm going to look for 3s in the 10th space. There's one, and there's one. This is 32 hundredths. This is 33 hundredths. So this one would be next. So we're going from least to greatest. 32 hundredths, and then my last one, 33 hundredths. So I'm going to double check. 1/10, 12 hundredths, 2/10, 21 hundredths, 32 hundredths, 33 hundredths. Those are in correct order from least to greatest. Now, you don't have to write them all as decimals. You can, or you can leave them like they were up here if you want to. I think I have it set on your assignment today. Either way you do it, it'll count them right. Some of these we're going to get to later on in the lesson, so you have to write them in decimal form. But you didn't have to do these because it wants you also to recognize the order in various forms. So you could have left, for example, this 1200s. You could have left it 12 hundredths as you wrote them in order if you wanted to. The 1/10, you could have left it 1/10, and you could have left it 32 hundredths, 32 hundredths. It'd still be right if you type them in like that. Okay, let's look at some more. All right. Got another one here. This time I'm not going to move them over to decimal form. I'm just going to go ahead and put them in order. Now, these are some mixed numbers this time, so let's take a look at these. Let's scoot this back a little bit here. All right, so I have 3 whole number, 3 whole number, 3 whole number, no whole number, no whole number. Okay, so if I have no whole number, that means it's 0 there, right? So that's going to be my smallest ones. Remember, we're writing these from least to greatest. So if I have a 3 as a whole number and a 0 as a whole number, my zeros are going to go first. So let's let's write these out. Now, we got to be careful with this. 38 tenths, we're going to have to decompose that, aren't we? I said we don't have a whole number, but we do. So I'm going to look over here and do 38 tenths. We can't leave that as an improper fraction. If we decompose it, it's going to be 10 tenths, 10 tenths, 10 tenths. There's 3, and then 8 tenths. So 38 tenths tricked me. It does have a whole number. It's actually 3, 1, you can't see that, 1, 2, 3 wholes and 8 tenths. So 38 tenths is 3 and 8 tenths. I got tricked again. 364 hundredths is an improper fraction. We've got to decompose that too. 364 hundredths. That's going to be 100 100ths, 100 100ths, 100 100ths, and 64 100ths. 100, 200, 364. So here's 1, 2, 3. And 64 hundredths. So don't get tricked like I almost did. So 38 tenths is the same as 3 and 8 tenths. And 364 hundredths is the same as 3 and 64 hundredths. Okay, so be careful on these. Now I've got all of them have a whole number of 3. So now I'm going to start looking at the tenths place. I've got a 6 in the tenths place, a 7 in the tenths place, and 8 would be 3. And 85 hundredths, what does it look like? 3.85. 3 and 8 tenths would be 3.8. 3 and 64 hundredths would be 3.64. I just about have to write these as decimals for me to see them or I get confused. So 6, 7, 8, 8, and 6. So I've got 3.62, 3.64. A 2 is smaller than a 4. So 3 and 62 hundredths was going to go first. Remember, when you type them in, just put the number, and immediately after that, put the comma, then a space. Okay, got that one. 3 and 64 hundredths is going to go next. I said I wasn't going to write these as decimals, but I tell you, it's just easier just to change them over because it gets confusing if you don't. To me, it does anyway. Do I have any more 6s in the tenths place? No. But I've got a 7 in the tenths place. 3 and 7 tenths. Then I've got no more 7s and 7s in the tenths place. I've got 2 8s in the tenths place. I've got an 8 in the tenths place and an 85 hundredths. This is put a 0 after that if I wanted to compare them. The 3.80, 3.85. Okay, 3 and 8 tenths would come next. And then 3 and 85 hundredths. So I've got that one done. So you think, oh, this is easy, put them in order, and maybe it's easier for you than it is for me, but it requires a little bit of thinking at the beginning to make sure that we got these in the right order. To me, I just have to write them as decimals. Looking at them in different forms is a little bit difficult for me, and so I'm just showing you what works best for me. If you can do it without changing them over, hey, go for it. But I suggest just to make sure you get them right, switch them over to decimals. On the next few problems, you're going to have to switch them over anyway. I think after this one, let's do one more without switching them over to decimals. So 6 and 3 tenths, but you know I'm going to anyway. Okay, so 6 and 3 tenths would be 6 and 3 tenths. Now, 628 hundredths, I'm not getting tricked this time. Okay, so 628, I'm not going to decompose it this time. How many times would 100 go into 600? It would go 6 times. Well, 6 times 100 is 600. Then there'd be 28 left. So that's 6 and 28 hundredths. 62 tenths. How many times will 10 go into 62? It goes 6 times. 10 times 6 is 60. There'd be 2 tenths left. Okay, so I'm going to write 6.28, 6.2, 6. Okay, these are already written as decimals. So let's see. So I'm going to look in the ones place. This is 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. They've got all sixes in the ones place. Let's look in the tenths place. What's the lowest number I see in the tenths place? A 2. All right, so 6 and 2/10 is smaller than 6 and 2800. So I'm going to do 6 and 2/10, and 6 and 2800. Any more 2s? No. So let's move to 3s in the tenths place. Okay, 6 and 3/10 would be next. 6 and 3100 would be next. And just on a side note here, when you have one that has 1 in the hundredths place and this one doesn't, just remember that 6 and 3/10 is the same as 6 and 30 hundredths. So if you get confused on comparing them, if they don't have some number in the hundredths place, just imagine a 0 there. And that way you can imagine that 30 hundredths would be less than 31 hundredths. Any more 3s in the tenths place on these? No. Got some 4s, so 6 and 4/10. 40 hundredths is what it is. And 6 and 43 hundredths. Okay. I'm just going to put a skinny 0 there, 6 and 40 hundredths. All right. So there's 3 examples. You're going to have some more to do, and you're just going to have to put them in, well, look here, greatest to least. It's just going to change it up on you. So we're going to do greatest to least in decimal form. I'm not going to work all of these for you because I think you got the hang of it by now, and you need to practice more than I need to do them. So I'm going to let you practice some. I'm going to do one more, least to greatest. This says using decimal form. That means you've got to make them decimals. You've got to make them decimals. So let's go ahead and make all of these decimals. 27/10. What's that going to look like? It's not going to be 0.27. Because this is an improper fraction. How many times will 10 go into 27? It's going to go 2, and there would be 7/10 left. So 2 and 7/10. How'd you do that, Mr. Helton? 27 divided by 10 is 2 and 7 left, like that, okay? So 2 and 7/10. That one's already a decimal. 27 hundredths is 0.27. 2 and 71 hundredths, like that. 227 hundredths, okay, this is going to be, how many times will 100 go into 200? It'll go 2 times, and there'll be 27 hundredths left, so 2.27. All right, I've got all these written as decimals now. That's the first thing you've got to do on these, is rewrite them out on your notebook paper as a decimal. And then don't forget what it asked us to do. Greatest to least. So we were doing least to greatest, but now it's saying greatest to least. So now we've got to pick the largest one first. So looks like all of these have a 2 in the ones place except for that one. I think that one's going to be the smallest one. It has a 0 in the ones place. So let's see the tenths place now. We're looking for the largest one first. A 7, a 7, a 7. Okay, so I've got 3 of them that have a 7 in the tenths place. The largest one is this one. It has a 2 in the hundredths place, 1 in the hundredths place, 0 in the hundredths place. So this one's going to be my first one. 2 and 72 hundredths, and then 2 and 71 hundredths, and then just want to remember, imagine a 0 there. 2 and 7/10. Okay, do we have any with 6s in the tens place? No. 5s? No, I'm looking at the next 3 we have left. We've got a 2 and then a 0. So this is going to be the next one. 2, 27 hundredths. 2 and 7 hundredths. And then our little tiny one is just 27 hundredths. All right, so we used greatest to least. They're in decimal form, and I'm looking back and double checking. It looks like we have done this correctly. All right, you got several to work like that today. Remember, pay attention to see if it's asking least to greatest or greatest to least. And the last few like these, you're going to have to do in decimal form. So make sure you do that, okay? All right. Well, I'll let you get started, and we'll talk about it in the meet if we need some help. See you then.